Hello, everyone. I'm Ike Eastman, the host of Eastman's Hunting Journal podcast. Thanks for listening. Today, my special guest is Bert Sorin. If you know Bert, you know that he was a national athletic hammer thrower. He was in the Highland Games, a national champion Highland game. He's done a ton of stuff. Now, what we talk about isn't just his career and who he is and why he hunts and all those things, but we talk about life. And he is one of the most profound people I've ever met. He has like 5 or 6 theories that he goes through. One of them is called the big buck theory. One of them is called don't die today. And then he also talks about engineering your life so that when you are on your deathbed, you've lived the life that you want to live. So let's talk to Bert and find out those 3 things, plus the interesting story of him and his background.
I wanted to share with you my recent experience with Sawyer products. They offer a great selection of products that are must-have if you're on an outdoor adventure. Their range includes water filtration systems, insect repellent, sunscreen, and even first aid kits, so you can be prepared for any situation in the backcountry. I highly recommend their dependable and top-notch lightweight products for your next outdoor adventure. The water filters work in any situation. They even have one that is good for 400,000 gallons of water. And if you buy a water filter, you're helping to save lives all over the world. They donate millions of filters to communities that don't have clean, drinkable water. I also love their sunscreen. It lasts all day, is not greasy, and is virtually scent-free. Their bug spray repels ticks and other biting bugs. You put it on your clothes or your pets, and it's good for 6 washings. It even works on my horses. So before your next adventure, check them out at Sawyer.com and let them know you heard it here, and thank them for supporting Eastman's.
He's like, I'm just really trying to figure out the ballistics on a 350 Rim Mag. It just really...
That's going to be what I'm thinking.
I should have shot the 225 grain.
If I already had the ELDX versus...
What was I thinking?
Yeah.
That's what I usually do. I research and think of ballistics before I go to bed.
Do you?
Yeah, because it's something that doesn't
matter. It's like
matter.
counting sheep?
Yeah, because it doesn't matter.
That's an interesting thought.
That's how my wife's like, what do you do? I go, I'm just doing stuff that doesn't matter. Because all the other things in my life that day matter. And this is interesting to me, but regardless of what I come up with, it won't matter.
Right.
If I'm like, like I've been on a 350 Rim Mag for some reason recently. I'm like, the 200 grains or the 220. I'm like, you know what? It doesn't matter. It was.
That's what you think about before bed.
It was seemingly interesting to me, and I'm like, maybe I'll shoot the 200s.
And you wake up.
Because now I've cleansed my mental palate of things that are like, because the worst thing my wife will do, like, we're almost about to sleep. I was like, night, honey, I love you. I'm like, hey, honey, what are we doing Tuesday afternoon? I'm like, what? You can't drop this on me right now. Like, I now have to solve problems.
Yeah, no. I'm not going to sleep for an hour now.
No, this is wild. So like my whole thing is like, think of something that doesn't matter. I'll like pull up and I'll look on my Onyx or my hunt stand and I'll just like look at my Missouri farm. I'm like, that would be a good ingress. I'll remember that. And I'll just close the phone and it's like, okay, now I'm back to...
Do you ever change your mind when you wake up? You're like,
No,
the
wind, 220. The ballistic coverage was terrible on the 200s. What was I thinking?
What was I thinking?
How did I even sleep? How did I sleep with this idiocy?
I'm rolling around dreaming in black and white now.
Yes.
Oh, that's fun. So, Bert, where did you grow up? Did you grow up in South Carolina?
I grew up in South Carolina.
Yeah. Small town?
Yeah, a little town called Irmo. It's like right outside of Columbia. Columbia is the capital city of South Carolina, right in the dead center. And grew up there. I haven't lived more than it's wild. I've never lived more than a 10-mile radius from where I was born.
You're kidding me.
Yeah, strange.
I figured you were a world liver.
Like a world liver.
Yeah, like lived in Europe when you were doing that stuff. And
no, I traveled a lot, but it's strange. I found this one little hamlet in South Carolina to be kind of just, it's not like a security blanket place. It's just, it always makes sense. There's a lot of woods, there's a lot of water, there's very liberal bag limits and easy to get tags. And it's have a little bit of winter, a little bit of summer. It's close to everything. The cost of living is pretty low. I have a support group, friend group, whatever. Now my business is there, of course. So when I was a younger man, I was like, oh, I'm totally moving. I just couldn't see myself living in South Carolina. And now it's like, if I lived anywhere else, it would be in the West, Montana, Wyoming, something like that, for the obvious reasons.
Right.
But if I have to live on the East Coast, it's like, hey, that's pretty good. Like so I'm from right there, man. Just homegrown.
So grew up hunting, obviously.
Yep, grew up hunting. My mom and my dad divorced when I was a kid, so I would see my dad on the weekends and the Wednesday thing until probably when I was like 10 or 11, and then I would start doing more outdoorsy type things. Just a little bit older. But I remember Dad, like I was 8 years old. It's so funny. I mean, he picked me up from like 3rd grade, so I was probably 8 or 9, 8 years old. And I remember him handing me a 10-22 and putting me on the side of a dirt road. And I'm like, he's like, we're going deer hunting. I'm like, okay. And we're going walking around. I remember he had a shotgun. He had a Browning Auto 5 shotgun with double up buck in it. And he was going, kicking them up out of the brush piles. That's one little man driveways. Yep. And he just put me on the side of a road, and I was like, he just sets me down and gave me a tiger stripe Vietnam era field jacket, and like it was like a dress on me. Yeah. And he gave me a 10-22. He's like, if a deer crosses this road, shoot it in the eye. I'm like, okay,
I can do that.
And that was my first deer hunt. And I was just sitting on the side of the road.
Did you shoot one?
No, I didn't. I mean, I had no idea what to look for. Like,
you're like, do they have eyes? I think they have eyes.
I bet they have those. So
I think I should be able to see it.
No, and it was funny. Like looking back, I never sat with my dad. And I killed my first big game animal. I think I was 10. It was a big wild boar. We were hunting, chasing with dogs. He went to bait up and whatever. And you'll laugh. My first big game rifle I ever shot was a .458 Win Mag, Ruger #1.
Oh my gosh!
That was what I killed when I was 10. I was 75.
Didn't break you in half?
No. So Pops, he loaded it a little bit lighter with 350 hollow points in it. Okay. And a little bit light. So it was like a hot 45-70. Yeah. And it was in that Ruger #1, so it was strangely a little bit of a heavy gun, that tropical rifle. Right. And I was 75 pounds, so he just taught me if I lean into it, when it kicks, it'll just kind of rock me backwards. And I just didn't know any better. I thought that's what a rifle was. And so later I got a 308, and I'm like, this is like a BB gun. This is funny.
I can actually watch the bullet.
Yeah, this is crazy. So yeah, my first kill was that, and then at 12 I shot a black bear with a .458, same load, in a Winchester Model 70. But that was in Maine, and the guy took me out and dropped me. It was a 12, so they legally couldn't have me out there by myself, but they finagled something because it was the 80s. Yeah. And they just set me out.
Those are just guidelines.
Yeah, you're too young. And then, of course, everything, whatever, how they figured that out. And then I ended up getting a tag somehow. Yeah. And they set me out. And it was kind of funny because he brought me to camp, and all these men were there, like, this bear camp, this man stuff. Who brought a kid? Like, and they were openly giving him some crap because I was like a little dude. And I just lucked out and killed a bear the first night. So I was the first guy in camp for the first 3 days it killed. Oh my gosh. This little 12-year-old kid. And then so I was like, I rubbed it in a little bit after that because I was kind of.
I thought you guys said this was hard.
Yeah, I was like, hey, can I go fly fishing? And so I was just sitting in the back. All the dudes were like, and so it was a very funny experience. That's awesome. So Pops got to walk pretty tall after that. He's like, hey, I told y'all not to worry about that guy. Yeah. Like, he's all right, So those are my first hunting experiences, which were all very positive. And, but of course there was those days, I got set in a deer stand with a Army poncho and a Remington 742 Woodsmaster 30-06 and in a torrential downpour, and when you realize you could actually be wetter than water. Yeah. You're just sitting there like,
how am I floating sitting here?
This is terrible. Like, it was the worst day ever. And of course, probably was like an hour, but at the time I'm like, no experience. How can my dad let me just sit out here in this rain, So I had all these fun, pivotal experiences as a kid to hunt. But then I was also reading capstick books back then and Hemingway books and all that. So there was, and even obviously your guys' stuff. So it was all the hunting magazines. And so there was that there's that like life wanting to imitate art.
Yeah.
You know, and I read about, like, I'd see these pictures of people hunting elk and mule deer. I'm like, man, when I grow up, I want to do that. Like, that is what I want to do. And then, you know, you take a air rifle in the backyard and schwack some squirrels, but you get to fantasize like that you're doing this thing.
This is an elk
day.
hunt.
Yeah.
I called that big squirrel in.
Yeah, it was amazing, right? And so, like, it was always an aspirational thing. Although I was doing it to a low extent, it was always something that I knew, like, I will get to do these things one day. And that was a driver of wanting to be successful, because I realized if I'm successful, I'll have more opportunities, and I'll get to do the things that I read about. And I mean, I remember sitting in math class in 10th grade, like making a graph of what I thought the perfect rifle and cartridge was for every North American big game. Now, I got a D in math, obviously.
But I have published that, and it is still true to this day.
But my bet was for a 300 Win Mag for mule deer, and I wasn't far off.
Yeah, that's right. That's
right. I just remember, like, the absurdity of it all, like in reading all the hunting magazines, the gun magazines during my study hall, because school wasn't very interesting. I just knew I always wanted to adventure.
So, but you did go to college.
I did.
I did. So did you? And I know your athletic career. We'll get into that. But were you an athlete in high school as well?
Yes and no. So I initially started weightlifting before anything, because actually I was in 9th grade and I wanted to kind of start. You kind of want to start getting muscles, and I was wrestling a little bit and everything, and so I started working out, and then. I asked my dad, I was like, hey, how do I want to buy Christmas presents for people this year? And so, like, what, will you give me some money for that? And he's like, well, I don't give you money. He's like, but how about this? He's like, every workout you take, and he would write my program. So it was like 2 hours. He was like, I'll pay you $5 for every time you work out. And I was like, oh, so that's like a job. Yeah. I was like, okay. So I saw it like, oh, here's an opportunity. But what he was teaching me was really hard work will pay off. It'll be just as good as money in the bank, and you'll thank me one day for this. And I remember I made like $200 before Christmas, and I was able to like feel the pride of like buying like good nice stuff. Gifts for people and stuff like that. And I remember after Christmas, I just told him, I was like, hey, I appreciate you doing it, but I don't need money anymore. Like, I really like this. And Dad laughs. He's like, that's the best $200 I ever spent. He's like, I was able to get you into weightlifting and understand what it was. And I was like, yeah, my whole career, my whole livelihood, like, was from that.
Started with $5.
$5.
So was your dad a trainer?
So he was always a weightlifter. Of course, he had started Sorin, and he was an athlete and a lifter. He was a national champion powerlifter as well. And so he would train a lot of the guys at our home gym there. So he was like the father figure of 20 or 30 lifters. So he was programming for everybody, and this was all back in the 80s and 90s. So, so me and my buddies would come there in high school, and he would like write us all workouts. But it was interesting in those first phases, like, you sometimes have to kind of like sweeten the deal a little bit to change a behavior. Right. And so that's how that started. And then later, I was getting into track and field later on in my high school career, but my first love was always the outdoors. And so everyone's like, you ought to play football. I'm like, that's in deer season.
Yeah, that's during the fall.
Yeah, it's in the fall. And so all I wanted to do was fly fish and spearfish, and I'd get a Hawaiian sling and swim under the docks and schwack catfish and
that's cool.
All that just little Huck Finn stuff. I was an only child, so I had like nothing but kind of time. Like, I didn't have to share time with anyone. So as long as I was off with school, like, I'd grab my hatchet and BB gun and go out and have fun.
That's cool. So then you got into track and field later in high school? Yeah,
so track and field later in high school, and I was not very good at it. I just wasn't. So I was a late bloomer, so I was 6'2", and almost 6'3", and 170 pounds when I graduated high school. So just a bean, right? Yeah, but I was still 17. I was young. I was a late bloomer, and I was young. So I went to college. I wanted to be I wanted to go to Appalachian State, be a ski instructor, whitewater rafting guy, hunting guide, fishing guide.
You wanted to live the seasonal life.
Yeah, exactly. My goal was Montana, Idaho, wherever. Mm-hmm. But Appalachian State was 3 hours from home, and the Appalachian, that was going to have to do for now. So after I applied, I of course applied late because I was goofing around in the woods or doing what I was doing. So I had to go to the University of South Carolina first for the first semester, get my grades and do all the dumb stuff. And it was like a very Forrest Gump-like way I got into sports. So I went to college. And so how old are you?
47.
47. We're both 47.
Yep.
So we grew up probably watching all the 80s movies and how what we viewed college was is probably significantly
Nerds and
Revenge of the Nerds.
Yeah,
Like I thought that was college.
Right.
So I was like, this is going to be awesome.
It's a giant party.
It's a giant party. Like I thought there was no really part of really studying. It was a giant party. This is going to be great. So the first 6 days of school, it was a giant party. Like I just went in and it was ham, right? Yeah. And then like the last day I kind of sobered up. I'm like, I should probably go work out because I still enjoyed lifting weights. And I called my dad because I knew at the rec center where the normal students, like all the equipment sucked. But the athletic gym had like all Sorinex stuff. I called, I was like, hey, do you think you could get me into there to lift on our gear? And so he calls the coach and who they were friends. And the coach says, yeah, he can come in after all the athletes are done, which was like towards the evening, Mm-hmm. But you have to also take into account I'm 17 years old, so details weren't really my thing. So
you went to college at 17?
Yeah, wild, right?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I left home at 17. And
Doogie Howser.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know what's going on. so I'm showing up. I'm a kid, right? And so he tells me, he's like, okay, show up, blah, blah, blah. And I can't remember what he says. So I just finished my lunch. I'm like, well, I'm going to go down there. So I walk into the University of South Carolina athletic weight room at the stadium, 80,000 people, blah, blah, blah. I walk in and it's the first week of school. So if you've ever been on a college campus during that time, there's like, it's bedlam, it's mayhem.
Right.
Like there's every athlete is in there. Like no one knows what's going on. Everyone's new. So if you're going to sneak into a college weight room,
it's the first 2 weeks of school because nobody knows anybody yet.
No one knows anybody, right? So I just cruise on in. I look around and walk over the platform. I start doing some power cleans. I'm like, this is cool. I'm like, it's a good time. No one said anything. I got to pay anything. This is awesome.
Worked.
I totally crashed.
Thanks, Dad.
I totally crashed a college weight room. And so these guys are in this line and they're doing vertical jump testing. Where you touch the little thing, you make the difference. I'm like, that looks cool because of course, growing up in the '80s, I'd seen Rocky IV and saw the cool diagnostics, and like I had never had that type of technology nor attention. I'm like, that's awesome. It's like riding a ride.
Yeah.
So I'm like, shit, I went and stood in line. And so it's like they get to me and they like, what's your name? I'm like, Bert. And so they hand me the sheet and I write my name on it and they measure me and I jump up and I touch the thing. And he's like, hey, 29.5 inches. That's pretty good. I was like, hey, thanks.
Okay.
And I walk off and then I was like, hey, I probably should bench press. I'm benching. And I see they have this other line and these dudes are standing in there and they're walking into this office and they pull up their shirt and they do these caliper tests of fat. And I'm like, I'm pretty lean because I'm lean. And I'm like, I wonder what body fat I am. That looks cool too. So I walk up there and I stand in this line. And this is so absurd.
You literally crashed an athletic department.
Yes, I crashed an athletic department. And so I'm standing in line. I'm like, hanging out. And I get the thing, and there's a guy sitting in a chair just like I am. And I'm like, I'm handing my sheet, right? And he's like, goes to do it. And he goes, all right, so what sport are you? Because my sport wasn't written on the sheet. And quick thinking, I was like, track and field. And totally made it up.
Because that's what I did in high school.
Because that's what I did at quarterly.
If they ask me a question, I might be able to answer it.
Yes, because I'll be able to answer idiosyncrasies of the situation because there's no way that guy knows anything.
This is all before computers because it would have been on a computer. We don't have a Bert.
Piece of paper on this guy. And so I'm like, oh yeah. And so he goes, oh, what events? I'm like, why does this guy care what events? I was like, well, shot put and discus because that's what I did, again, poorly. And I was like, yeah, but I did it in high school. I wasn't very good, but I was thinking about walking on in the spring. I was like, okay, that's going to get me off all the hooks.
Right.
I'm here for a reason. I'm thinking about walking on, which was 0% accuracy. I just want this dude to stop asking questions so I can
just caliper me, man.
Just caliper me, man. Do the thing. Do the thing so I can go.
Do the thing.
Do the thing. So he's like, oh, and he keeps asking questions. He's like, well, how far did you throw? I'm like, what are we going for here, man? Like,
I don't know. How far's good? Good enough.
Yeah, exactly. And so finally he goes, well, that's not very good. And I was like, yeah, I know. I already told you I wasn't very good. And he's like, well, my name's Larry Judge. I'm the throws coach at the University of South Carolina.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, in a town of 100,000 people,
you get the throws coach.
The guy who could call bullshit on this. The guy. The only guy. In a city of 100,000 people, the one person
You couldn't get like the football assistant coach that knows nothing about throwing.
It could have been anyone else in the athletic department. It could have been a janitor. It could have been anyone. But that guy, I didn't realize he was a legendary and will later be a legendary like USA track and field team coach, like baller coach.
Right.
And he was just like, oh, and I'm like, oh, I'm in my mind. I'm like, I'm screwed.
Yeah, I'm getting kicked out of here.
Yeah,
You're not going to do the
I'm
thing,
getting totally
are you?
kicked. We're not getting to do the thing, are we? Yeah, it would be like if you were like, yeah, no, I killed this really big buck. He's like, oh yeah, how big? And then he's like, my name is Boone and Crockett. Right?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
And so he told me, and he's like, okay, well, practice starts tomorrow if you're going to walk on. I'm like, Coach, like
track was in the fall
or
or spring.
I said, no, track's a spring sport. He goes, son, you're in college now. It starts now. And I go, okay. And I'm still trying to like wiggle off the hook, right? I'm trying to shake the hook. And I was like, okay, Coach. I was like, I'll try to make it tomorrow. And he goes, son, if you're going to be the team, you will make it tomorrow. I go, okay. And I just kind of moonwalked out of there, and I was like, did some stuff, and I was like, oh shit. So I went back.
Did I just sign up for something?
I went to my dorm room, and I'm like, my roommate was like, how's your workout? I was like, I think I'm on the track team. And he goes, what? He goes, you were gone for like an hour and a half. I was just like, I don't know, man.
I think I just got on the debate team on the way home.
Basically. So I called my dad. He's like, how's your workout? I was like, I think I'm on the track team. And now, take into account the reason why we're in South Carolina is because my dad was the highest recruited discus thrower out of high school, out of New Jersey. Hence, he went to the University of South Carolina. And that's why.
So your dad
he's like
is
a legacy legend, and he's going like, what? Because he knows I suck.
Yeah. He's like, you didn't get this for me.
Yeah, you did it, and you don't have to do this. Like, this isn't weird joke. You know, like, well, why are you doing this? And he's like, so what are you going to do? And I was like, I guess I'll show up. And like, that was the first, I talk about the open doors. People look at my life and some other people's life and they talk about like, oh, you get to do so many cool things. You get to like, whatever. And I kind of started backing it up and I'm like, what? Yeah, I agree. It's like, why is that? And I was like, I think people have a lot more open doors in their life. And they say, oh, nothing ever cool happens to me. You just didn't see the open door, or you were too afraid to walk through it.
100% agree.
You know,
100% agree.
Opportunities are everywhere. Most people are too scared or too blind or too whatever to walk through the door. And that was my first door that was open. If you will be here tomorrow, if you will be on the team, you will be here tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I went, okay.
And you weren't scared of the failure. You're
I
like,
don't
what?
know.
What? It's all up from here.
I already suck. I'm already not on the team.
Yeah.
So I don't even know if I even want to throw. It wasn't like, man, I'm going to be a college athlete one day.
Yeah.
It was, okay, that sounds interesting. I'll walk through that door. I'll see what's on the other side of that field. Let me glass over there.
Let them tell me I can't.
Yeah, yes. And so I showed up and I was like, it was the scariest thing. There's these huge people. They're recruited from everywhere. And I'm like this dude. And then like a week into it, like we're doing all these practices and I'm enjoying myself. And the guys on the team are cool and I like hanging out with them. And it was like, for the first time in my life, I was like, I'm an athlete now. I'm someone that I look up to. I've always wanted to be an athlete. I've always wanted to be good at something. I've always been good at stuff. I've never been great at stuff. And this was the first thing. It was like, I'm in a path, in a pipeline. I could be great at a thing because the guys I eat lunch with every day are. And so what I'm seeing is they're humans just like me. And I watch the work they do. And I know about their families and I know where they're from. And I started realizing the people I was holding in my mind in really, really high regard, we were just kind of the same. They walked through different doors. Maybe they had some different genetics. Maybe they've optimized some different opportunities. Just like later, I realized that people that kill big elk and mule deer and do all the fun stuff that I thought about and daydreamed about when I was in 9th grade, they are people just like me, and I could go do those things. I could do those aspirational things. There's nothing between. You remember the movie The Edge?
Yeah.
With Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah.
What he says, what one man can do, another can do. And I started realizing that. I was like, oh, so if I do the program and I do all this stuff, but I have to work extra hard because I got to catch all these guys.
Right.
And I started seeing myself get stronger and stronger and strong, like daily, like it was like wild.
Really?
It was crazy. I gained 30 pounds in a semester.
Oh my gosh.
I went from 172 to almost 199. And by Christmas.
20% of your body.
Yeah. And my body fat went from like 7% to 8%. So I put on like 25 pounds of muscle.
Oh my Lord.
It was insane. So you talk about a young man who's like wanting to prove himself and to be somebody. And I remember, never forget, I was leaving to go home for Christmas. And you know, this is like, you don't have phones and crap back then,
right.
And mirrors in your room, you don't know. And I remember I stood on my dorm room table to get something, or my chair to get something out of my closet. And I just happened to look across the room and there was a mirror on the wall. And all I could see was like from here down on my body. And I'm like in my underwear and I was like, whose legs are those? And it was the snapshot. And then I was like, holy shit.
Oh my gosh, I got muscles.
Yeah, I was like, I have like thighs and an ass. And like, oh, that's what all those squats that I was puking and all the things and all the food I was eating and all the stuff, like, I'm a different bear now. And it was like, once I figured that out,
oh man.
Oh dude, you could not keep me out of that. And it became addictive. It was just like, oh, because now I understand the economy is if I outwork everyone and put in as much work as more work I put in, the more comes back. Mm-hmm. And if this is the economy of life, oh heck yeah. And then that just set on a trajectory where my 5th year in college, I got my 4th All-American because I was sitting there eating. I remember as a freshman, I was eating with people and they were like, so-and-so is a 2-time All-American. I was like, what does that mean? They're like, well, it means you're like one of the best guys in America. I was like, well, how's that? They go, well, you have to go to the national championships and blah. I go, what are those? Like, I didn't know anything. And he was like, well, you got to go to the conference. I'm like, what's a conference? He's like, well, that's the SEC. I'm like, where's that? He goes, you're in it. I go, okay. I said, so what do I have to do? He goes, go to that meet and score points. And I go, okay. And I scored 8 out of 8 SEC championships in my career.
Wow.
Because I was like, okay, that's what I'm supposed to do. So, and I would just look at the list. I'm like, all right, I got to at least beat that place. And then I would just fire after it. And then my last throw of my college career at SECs, I broke the SEC record with a 3-foot PR on my 6th throw and last throw of and I broke the SEC record and won the championship.
Oh my God.
And it was like, oh.
All because you wanted a thing. You just wanted to measure your body fat.
Yeah, because I was interested. And so what I later realized too is like curiosity is the thing that makes you a driver. If you want to know what's on the other side of that door, you got to go look at it. You got to run the experiment. My wife laughs all the time. Because what I realized in life is I'm a scientist in some ways, and that all that means is I have to run the experiment. For instance, perfect example, looking at those ingress and egresses on my maps. All right, that's hypothesis. I think this is going to work. But how do I know if there's a big buck I'm going to kill? I have to run the experiment.
You got to go.
I got to go. I have to go walk to the top of that mountain. I have to crest this next hill and glass in the next bowl. Why? The hypothesis, there could be something there, but I won't know unless I get the data. And so now what I realized, the things that tripped my trigger were training was running the experiment. My hypothesis is the workout. Here's what I think the recipe to success is. I could think about it, I could pontificate it, I could plan it all I want. It doesn't mean crap. It's a thing on a paper unless I run the experiment, which means I got to dedicate the next 8 weeks of my life to this. And then I could come back and say, hypothesis is right, hypothesis is wrong. Based on data, I can make these adjustments. What I realized at 17 years old, I got addicted to that process. And that started that hunting, fishing, adventures, business,
marriage,
kids, the whole thing. Because my wife one day, she's like, "Did you think, that your life would be like this?" And I go, "Strangely, yes. This is what I envisioned it would be. I planned for it to do this, and I worked my ass off to make it this. So is it kind of surprising? Yes, just as surprising it was that I got good at athletics, because you're like, holy crap, I'm here."
Right.
But the other part of it was like, no, this is what I envisioned. When I was 10 years old, I remember fantasizing about having 10-year-olds and taking them hunting. 30-something years prior going, when I have little boys, I can't wait to take them and do this. So I was like, it's kind of like almost living your life in reverse. It's like, pick where you want to be, which is exactly what athletic programming is. I want to be good on January 12th when I throw at the national championships. You start backing it up to day now, and then you go, okay, so here's how today starts today. And then this is my linear or undulating progression that's going to get me to that point. But that's hunting, that's business, that's all those things, right? So I think I was very fortunate to figure out that process early and fall in love with the process and fall in love with all this might take a really long time. I mean, I had a thing on my computer screen, this little thing I printed out, and it basically said something to I mean, it was there for years, and it said, like, I will prepare for years and one day I will win. It just meant, it reminded me that there is no such thing as failure, there's just delayed success. And so it's like, okay, I could get my nuts kicked in for 20 years. I'm gonna lose a lot before I win a little, and just realizing that. But that's what keeps you going on day 7 of an elk hunt or whatever. It's like, no, eventually the numbers will stack up in my direction, and that's okay. And that's just, but my dream of how this is gonna work out, it will happen if I just take enough reps at it, take enough shots at it and everything like that. So like that my athletic career, it inadvertently taught me that. And that's why I still have such a passion for that, because it gave me everything. It gave me the formatting of everything I've ever been successful at.
What's really interesting and what I appreciate a lot about you, Bert, is that not only did you do that stuff, but you sat back and ran this experiment, as you say, on why. And then, you didn't just go, well, I did it. I don't know why, but I did it. The wisdom, I think, is that you sat back and said, how did I do that? And how do I do this on other parts of my life, and that you're willing to share it. This is the secret to success.
In some ways, in some ways, and I think, and I appreciate you saying that. I think I've been inquisitive enough where I'm attracted to successful people, and not necessarily to rub elbows or hobnob. It's like, I want to celebrate their success, but I also want to know how you did it.
Yeah.
I'll listen, and heck, when I was throwing, it was funny. If I got beat, I would invite that person to dinner, and I would feed them beers until they got loose-lipped, and they would tell me all of their training. And they would tell me their mindsets of competition. And I learned so many things that ended up building what I call my competition fortress. And I was building my fortress based on things that I was learning for how other people won. And so just find winners and let them talk.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, you viewed it like this. I've always viewed it differently, but I see how yours would be a faster track to making a good decision. It's like, okay, I need to change my hypothesis on this one. Yeah. But then you kind of come to the realization, like, I can't take all this with me. Like, I've had to plow all these fields and do all this work to learn how to be relatively successful. It's like, well, what is real success, in my opinion, is forwarding that on to the next person, which makes their track a little bit easier, a little bit better, because that's certainly what I did.
Right. And
then hopefully someone could have more success than I did, potentially faster. And then hopefully they'll be within my bloodline or within my radius of influence, and so on, because you want to see your friends do amazing things. Right. You want to see your kids do amazing things. And so, like, I guess part of being an only child, you get pretty introspective, and you get a chance to sit back and kind of like, okay, why did that happen? Why did that not happen? And I think I've had an ability to do that, but I think one thing I will say is a gift that I have, I could learn experiences without doing them.
By watching someone else.
By watching. I could generally learn the mistakes not to make by watching, like,
which is really unique for an only child. Typically you see that with people like the younger sibling watching their older sibling make mistakes, and that becomes a habit. That's really unique that you did that as an only child.
That is strange. My dad and I call it the big buck theory. It's like, the big bucks are the ones that figure out the game the fastest.
Yeah.
It's sometimes it's genetics, but really, and I wrote it in some of my kind of meditations, like, those who win in business, the biggest deer, like all that, are the ones who figure out the game. The deer if a deer is 4.5 years old and he doesn't realize there's a hunting season left, that there's actually a hunting season, he's not making it in the 5.5.
Right.
His horns are going to be big enough, he's going to walk across the middle of the field in the middle of the day.
He's going to get plowed.
Because he hadn't figured out that deal yet. The deer that figures it out at 2, before people are shooting at him, he's a ghost. And so it's always been kind of looked at that in, whether it's business or life or whatever, it's like, okay, what things jam people up, you know? And a buddy of mine said to me one day, he's like, hey man, he's like, there's some undefeateds in this life. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, he goes, these are things he told his kids. He's like, these are things that historically through time have derailed great men. And he goes, there's three things. He goes, one of them is time, Father Time. He goes, and no one's ever beat it. He goes, so just realize that you're not beating time on it. Right. He goes, but the other two you can. He goes, heavy use of drugs and alcohol have derailed more people. He goes, that's half of them. He goes, and the other half is infidelity. He goes, you look to the Bible, you look to politicians, you look to most people that have screwed up their life and the falls from grace. He goes, you cut out infidelity and you cut out heavy use of drugs and alcohol. He goes, you're pretty much bulletproof.
Right, it's true.
And I was just like, holy cow. And so you look at that and you're like, so I don't need to make those mistakes to believe him.
Yeah,
then
I don't have to. I can read it all. It's all through history. The
look,
Bible, all the way to
look at everything.
Leadership, to politicians, you name it. Yeah,
all of it. And you're like, whoa, that's just two biggies, right?
Wow.
And then you're just like, so as a big buck, you go, got it. It gets cold. Don't leave your bed unless it's dark. You're going to die an old deer. Yep. Like you kind of start realizing those things, and you're like, okay. And but another part of it is, you know, pride. Pride is what I see. That big buck is 200 inches, and he wants to walk across that field and show all the does how big he is. He's going to get shot.
Yep.
And so you're like, okay, I can learn from that too.
Are you an avid hunter looking for the perfect trailer to haul your gear? Look no further than Team Lodge trailers. These trailers are made in South Dakota and for the ultimate hybrid of a camper and a trailer. With the ability to haul your side-by-side ATV, dirt bike, e-bikes, and more, you'll never have to leave your gear behind. They are extremely sturdy with no wind shake or movement when someone is walking in the camper. Plus, they are waterproof and designed by hunters who actually use the product. The bear-proof base camp ensures to safety while out in the wild. You'll also love that these trailers are outfitted with the only accessories and the features you want. Premium components are used in every part of the setups, making Team Lodge trailers the best choice for your outdoor adventures.
You know, and so I try to pull things that I see in nature and people and patterns and go, okay, what am I seeing in this? Like, what is this really good? Is this something I'm seeing that's going to lead to success, or is this going to lead to failure? And I think I've had an ability to do that.
That's really cool. That's really insightful. The big buck theory and the three things, the three big things.
Three big things, man.
So after college,
yeah,
because I know that because we've known each other for years, I know some of this story. So I'm going to lead you down after college. What happened? You graduate college. You're done with. Do you go? Okay, I want to go to the Olympics.
Yeah. So it's kind of one of those weird ones. Like, you know, you have a good career and you're kind of in that weird, hey, now what's next, right? And so that was 1999. I start working for my dad. He's like, you can start whenever you want as long as it's July 1. Because that's the next fiscal year. And so I had 2 weeks off. And so I'm like, so I just caught a whole bunch of striped bass for the next 2 weeks. So, because I had like my last nationals, blah, blah, blah. And then you're sitting there going, well, 2000 Olympic trials is coming. I think it was Athens, Greece that year. Or maybe Sydney.
I think it was Sydney.
Sydney, yeah, and then
2000.
Athens was 04.
Yeah.
And then, so you're like, man, like, again, that was the open door that was relatively open, but it's like, are you going to put another year into this by yourself as being a normal adult with a job and all the other things, and everyone's graduating, they're going to go off to their banker jobs or whatever are you going to be a guy that still spins around with a heavy ball in a field by yourself for a year? Mm-hmm. Like, do you love it that much? And yes, I loved it, but what I realize now in talking about it, it was the experiment. I had to run the experiment. Oh. It was, what can happen in a year? What will happen? I got to know, because I don't want to be 40 years old and wonder what could have happened. Right. I can't handle that. So I went into it. There was obviously some adjustments when you go from a training system and a team and a coach and normal times to run, like not running sore next to the time, but working at 50 hours a week, and then at 5:30 you become a professional athlete, which mm-hmm. is just not a system for success. So I had a bad day to have a bad day, missed finals by a centimeter, And of course, that was a really great article, former Gamecock misses finals by a centimeter. I'm like, awesome. Your mom cuts it out. Make sure you have that one. That's great.
Awesome experiment.
This is neat.
A centimeter? Seriously?
Centimeter, yeah, 1 centimeter.
Somebody couldn't have shortened that tape.
Yeah. So I called for. I protested and called for steel tape. And I was like, hey, like this is knocking me out of finals. Like, it's the same imperial measurement. It's just a different metric.
Right.
And they're whatever. Anyway, they're like, good story.
Nice try.
Yeah. And then so I got to watch the finals from the stands, and so that's something you learn too. And then you think of like, what are all the things I could have done
different?
And then so I said, well, there's another Olympics in 4 years. Got to run an experiment.
Oh my gosh.
So then you spin around to the left in a field by yourself for 4 years with no one else out there. And then you're like, do I really love this? And you're like, said I did, and you do.
Did you ever get to the point where you went, I've come this far?
I've come this far to come this far.
Yeah.
That's basically what it was. And it was just like, and the bad part is I kept getting incrementally a little better.
Enough.
Just enough, right? It's like there's close misses, right? You have the same dopamine hit. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, I train up, I go to the 04, I had a big PR that year, I added a couple meters to my throw, and I'm coming into Olympic trials feeling great. And it's one of those, it had a bad day to have a bad day. And I missed finals again. We take 12, I was 13th.
Oh.
Again.
Oh.
And you're just like, the interesting, again, retrospectively looking at it, it was the first time in my professional ranks at a big meet, aka Nationals Olympic Trials, that I was ever one of the most ready guys there. I was usually like one of the bubble underdog guys coming in, because I mean everyone has coaches and this and that, and I'm like I was doing like an install the day before.
Right.
I'm like, all right, like find my jersey, like let's go be a professional athlete.
Right.
But I was just on a heater, and I was coming through, and I remember I was in the warm-ups, and I was throwing bombs in warm-ups, like way over my lifetime best, and I was just like, boop, I was just throwing, and I was like 80% hot. I was oh my gosh, this is going to be wild, and everyone was off. And I'm like, holy crap, I'm gonna make the freaking team. And I walked past my buddy who's a 4-time Olympian, who's one of my mentors, and he was trying to be cool with me, and did the whole Happy Gilmore. He's like, somebody learn how to throw, and I just started laughing. And I look back, and it wasn't necessarily that, but it was the feeling that I had never had in my professional career was, dude, you did it. You did it. And what I later realized was, see, Napoleon used to do this when he in battle. So he would feign a defeat. And what he realized was that the dopamine hit would hit his opponents really quickly, like, we won, and they'd start cheering and everything, and then the cortisol would kick in, and they'd go over the hump of the dopamine, and they would start getting into a sleepy state because everything was like, and then he would hit his second attack. And I realized I did that to myself, because I was tight, I was ready to fight. And in that moment when those balls were going that far, and I had arguably one of the best ever to do the sport, comment that like, basically he said, dude, you're ready. Mm-hmm. Like, you figured it out. In my mind, I looked back and I went, I did it. Forgetting I hadn't thrown in the competition yet. Mm. It was looking at that buck and figuring out, are you going to have him a semi-upright right turn or left turn?
You'd already killed him.
And you're still 400 yards out. Yeah. And you haven't turned your dial yet. And you're like, oh, but yeah, it's going to be about $1,100 for that mount. Yeah. I'm going to have it here. And we've all done that, right? We've all decided,
cashing the check before you ever got paid.
We've all talked about the banquet before we got finished with the hunt, right? Yeah. And that was like my first experience of really doing it. And I remember all my tension and all my nervous energy I'd ridden off of just went, and I was like dead flat. Because I was just like, got this. And I remember walking into the ring on my first throw, and I was like, I could go to sleep right now. What the hell just happened? So I'm like, I better turn up the gas on this thing. Well, when you turn up the gas on a tempo thing, your timing changes, smack into the cage. I'm like, oh shit.
Uh-oh.
Well, now all that does is turn on negative pressure because you're like, I gave away one of my first 3 throws. Like, I'm good. Just pull your shit together. You're fine. But I'm like, man, I'm still just not up. I'm not feeling like that fight ready. Walk in, now got this, put one out there, make finals, let's move on with the day. Man, same spot in the cage. And I remember looking up and I was on the Jumbotron. My face was on the Jumbotron in front of 40,000 people. You could just see me go, and I watched myself deflate. And I was just like, Bert, you're in a F position right now.
Yeah, we're in trouble.
I was like, you're in trouble, man. 4 years of training and you have one throw to pull this shit out. Like you pissed 2/3 of your opportunity down your leg and then you get a yard sale in your mind. Everything starts going wrong.
Yeah.
You're like, I should have had a coach. I should have done this. I should have blah, blah, I should have, like instead of just like lock back in and get the work done, right?
Right.
It was just like all the things. Should I hammer a coffee real quick and wake up? Should I do a bunch of push-ups?
Yeah.
Should I do a bunch of drills? All the things, right? Last row came out and I started drifting because what happens when you start rushing, you start under-rotating because your foot comes down too early. And so I started under-rotating, which means I'm turning, instead of into the sector, I'm turning into the cage. And right as I went to release, I felt it and I just like yammed back on it and just pulled it back in sector to 13th place. And it's just, I was throwing between 235 and 240 in warm-ups, and I threw 220 on the dot.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm just like, and that was 13th, and I was throwing 15 to 18 feet further in warm-ups. Like,
if you would have hit that 240,
I think I would have got third that year. I would have still had to hit the standard, but I would have been on the team.
So do you have a way to, if looking back at it, was there a way to keep that from happening?
I wrestled with that in my next sport, which was Highland Games. I've wrestled with that in archery hunting and regular hunting, and sometimes I win, sometimes I lose, right? But that's been the for then battle, because that was the high water mark of you've got to be kidding me, And then it's, a lot of it's mental preparation, a lot of it's just learning not to go ahead,
recognizing that you're headed down that direction.
Recognizing that that's happening, and just shutting other things out, staying on task, focusing. It's like, we did those SIG Hunter games this year or 2 years ago or whatever it was. And it was like, at a couple of those points, you're like, you start rushing and start doing it. You're like, hold on, do what you know to do. Squeeze, put and to make the bullet go there. You're fine. Just keep rolling, keep rolling. And so I've gotten better at it, but I'll be honest, it's still something that haunts me at times. But I kind of want it to, because I want to never forget that that's a possibility. I don't want to be like, hey, I got this, because that's when you start screwing stuff up. But that was a really, really hard one, because you inadvertently you've trained for 5 years. I mean, that's like almost like biblical. Like, come back in 5 years and see how it is, right? You're just like, and I remember sitting in a hotel. I was drunk for like 3 days. And the news was calling me, and my parents were calling me, and friends were calling me, and I'm like, yeah, good, blah, 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 blah. And I just remember just being drunk and mad, and you're just like, I just pissed 5 years down my life. Like, what am I doing? Now? Like, the whole thing, right? And people were like, dude, but you're on one. Like, you got the 08. I'm like,
I'm not going to do this another 4 years.
Now we're gonna do 9 years of this. Like, I'm gonna go in a gravel parking lot and spin around to my left without anyone there, and forego relationships and friends and all the things to maybe do this again.
Jeez.
And I was just like, I don't got it in me anymore, man. Like, I started realizing how much I gave up. Like, how much, it wasn't just time, it was, my body was just smashed. It's like, you're a NASCAR, you're running left. So, I mean, I still have imbalances in my back, and I haven't thrown since 2004, 20 years. I still have my left hip hurts,
Really?
Because you're doing something as hard as you possibly can in one direction.
Over and over.
And the better you are, the more you're doing it, and the more, whatever. So it's like, yeah, I finally just said, okay, that's it. And so, what I also realized then was my identity was tied up in Bert the hammer thrower. And that was part of what I could not release, because it was like, but people are, I had this wildly falsified idea that people gave a shit. Like, it's weird to say it that way.
Yeah.
But I was like, well, what am I going to, like, I'm the guy who's training for the Olympics. I'm not like, I built this narrative, all the things, right? And what broke me from that, I had a roommate at the time, and I came home, and it was like a week after the trials, and he's like, hey man, you want to go hunt, or you want to go fishing today? Because stripers were running late July. I was like, yeah. He goes, you don't have practice? And I was like, no, I'm not throwing anymore. He goes, oh, you want to take your boat or mine?
That was it. He didn't give a shit.
He didn't give a shit. And I was like, oh wow, one of my oldest friends, it was a 4-second conversation, and his thing was, oh good, you don't feel like doing that anymore? Cool. Anyway, you want to take your boat or mine?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, we can take mine. He's like, all right, I'll grab the rods. And that was it. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I built up this whole thing in my mind that the world was going to collapse if Bert the hammer thrower wasn't doing his thing. And I realized that hammer throw was a thing I did. It wasn't who I was. And it was just like, and so people would like, a couple of people, they would nickname me, they call me Hammer, like Hammer, blah, blah, blah. I go, hey man, like, or they're like, oh, he's a great hammer thrower or whatever. It was just absurd to be a hammer thrower anyway. But it's like, no, that's a thing I've done. I was good at that. Like, I did that. That was one of my adventures. I will now show you I have other adventures.
It's like when people retire. That's one of the things that guys struggle with when they retire. They're Frank the mailman, and it becomes who they are. And when they retire, they're no longer a mailman, and a lot of times they lose themselves or they end up dying.
Correct. Because
that's who they were.
That's who they were. And I at that point I realized I can't associate my vocation or any of that stuff with who I am. And I remember thinking, I was like, my God, I mean, I went so long that in track and field, all you care about is either winning a championship or a big number as your PR, personal record. Right. That's all that matters. Because at the end of the day, when you look up me on the IAAF leaderboard of all time, 72 meters, 26 will be the number, and that's how I am judged as what my career was.
Right.
And I remember thinking, I was like, how obscure is that? Like, I would die to make that number higher at that time. And then I made a point to, it's funny that I remember the number, but I made it a point, I was like, I want to forget that number if I can. I don't ever want that number on my tombstone. I don't want that. And it's not that I'm mad at it, but I just like, but if that's what I'm relegated to is that, then I've now forfeited all my future adventures, all my future growth, all my challenges. And then so I found myself a year later in a professional Scottish Highland Games athlete, and I had another adventure. And I went on and I won a world championship, and I did a whole bunch of stuff, and I went around and traveled to the US, traveled to Scotland, and I had like a 4-year like, hey, this is a new fun thing. And then, yeah.
So did you, I mean, obviously demoralized all that after, and then did you just step into the Highland Games, or did you go, I need to go do something else?
No, a couple months after that, my dad got cancer. And so then it was like the darkest times of my life, because I was having to take care of my grandmother died of cancer, and I was her executor of her will, so I was dealing with that 2 months after my trials. And then 5 months after that, my dad gets cancer. And he and I are the only employees, so now Bert is the only employee of Sorex.
Oh my gosh.
And so we had a business thing break down, so we had to lift our partner. So I was running Sorex off of web TV in my dad's kitchen on his computer during the day. And at night, I was going in and doing like plumbing and drywall and stuff, and like rebuilding our new facility so we would have a new home, while dealing with like, I suck as an athlete, I wasted my time. So like, there was like a 2-year period of time that's like, not trying to over dramatize it, but like, I don't really remember what happened then. It was just like,
I can only imagine.
And then my dad had to put in his life savings because we were screwed up financially. I went without a salary for months and months. He went it was like, the saying that I had during that time was, don't die today.
Live till tomorrow, at least.
At least. Just don't die today. Like, don't go out of business today.
Wow.
Do whatever you gotta do, just don't go bankrupt today. Don't let dad die, literally, today. Tomorrow, man, I don't know. We'll see.
Wow.
And that was 2005. a lot of six. And it was just one of those like, you know, I'm paying my buddies to help me build the gym and build that HQ, and I didn't have money, so I would buy them sandwiches from Firehouse Subs, and I would run it on credit cards, and like that was the only thing I had. And so guys just stepped up. I give them like, you know, 5-year membership deals to our gym. Like, I'm like, you can work out for the rest of your life if you help me put up this drywall. Like, you know, and I was doing that all night and all this other stuff. And so I don't really remember that time. I just remember it just sucked. It was like, and I don't like to use the term PTSD, but I could understand the mechanism of it. When there's been a trauma to some extent where you're just like, I don't know. I just remember it was bad. I did bad place in my mind, you know, wrapped it up in a bow. But eventually, Don't Die Today became Don't Die This Week. Then it was Don't Die This Month. Then it was, hey, we might be all right for a while, you know, but that was like a year or two. And so like, you just kind of, that's the only way I could put it. Like, I talked to Andy Stumpf. Do you know Andy? SEAL Team 6 guy, runs the Cleared Hot podcast. You know Andy. So he was telling me when he ran what they call Buds training, he was an instructor. He was like, the goal, Buds was not something to necessarily get them better. It was to burn off everyone who was not a SEAL. It was to find the SEALs, not make SEALs necessarily.
Yeah.
And he's like, the way we got rid of people in attrition way, he goes, was to make their world as big as possible. I go, what do you mean? He goes, I wanted to tell them how many push-ups they were going to do, how many miles they were going to run, how many blisters they were going to get. He goes, I stacked all those numbers on them to break their mind, to show them how big and how Screwsville they were in. He's like, how you get through it, you make your life as small as possible. And that literally boiled down to 2 things, he said. I never forget. He goes, right foot, left foot. Right foot, left foot. And he goes, and realize they can't kill you and they have to feed you every 6 hours. And I'm just like, that was 2005. That was what that was.
Don't die today.
Don't die today. Just do whatever you can. Just, if you're hurt, stand up, because you can't die on your feet. Just freaking stand up. Get off your ass. Like, if you lay down, you're that much closer to dying. Don't die. Okay, good. We're not dying right now. All right, then things are probably better than they were a minute ago, right?
Yeah.
And so that was the mindset. And about things started clearing up, and then about 2005 or 6, about 6 or 7, I was talking to someone, and I was like, I had this idea. I was like, man, I would love to be able to like do something that no one's ever done. So I had this harebrained idea of taking all the strength disciplines, which would be powerlifting, Olympic lifting, Highland Games, track and field, and strongman. Those were all the disciplines at the time. And I was like, man, if you can make the national championships in all 5 as an athlete, I was like, you would have to be one of the best well-rounded athletes of that type genre, because some of them are technical, some of them are. I couldn't figure out anyone who had made all 5. Like all the greats, everyone 1, 2, 3, but like no one had ever done all 5, and no one had ever done it in 12 months. And I was like, man, if you could figure out programming to make it and then document it, the whole thing, it would be like a really cool case study. So I'm like, well,
hell of an experiment.
But got to run the experiment, right? Right back to that. And so I remember thinking, I was like, well, I think I'm good for all of it but Highland Games. And so I'm like, I don't even know what the national championships is. So I called Iron Mind magazine, Randy Stross, and I was like, hey, I threw in 1 or 2 games before. I got this harebrained idea, but I got to know if like, how could I rate? How can I like get to that level? And he was like, well, that's interesting. I was like, what's the national championships? He's like, well, I guess that'd be probably Pleasanton and California. I was like, well, how do you do it? He goes, well, you have to be blah, 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 this good. I was like, looks like I'm a Highland Games athlete.
Oh my gosh.
So I started doing that.
I just want the thing.
It's one of the thing, man. But that was the one I needed, right? And I started doing it, and I because I had a strength background, I was pretty good at it. But there's 7 events, up to 9 sometimes. So it's like a decathlon, Scottish decathlon. So the events that were kind of like things I'd already done, I would generally win those events just because that's what I did. And then there's a couple events that were just bonkers, throwing trees and crap like that. And it's like I didn't do it. So I never won a full game because I would win like 4 events and I get a second, and I get like dead last in 2 because I just wasn't well rounded, right? And so I was at like the 4th or 5th game I was at in Savannah, and I threw, at the end of the game, I went up and introduced myself to the athletic director. Hey, thank you for having me. He goes, I was like, my name's Bert. He goes, you're Sorin. I go, yeah, what's up? And he goes, you're the ones they said would be great if you tried. And I was like, wait, what? And they're like, yeah, like you're like an Olympic hammer guy or something like that, but you don't really practice this stuff, so like you never win, but they said you would be good if you actually practiced. And I was just infuriated and embarrassed because I'm thinking, you knew my last name and that was associated with not trying. F that. And I was like, oh. And it was like that one of those, like every 10 years you have someone say something to you that's like a pivotal thing. And I was just fuming driving home. And I'm like, hey, you can't say it. And I was like, no, they can say that because that's exactly accurate. Like, I F around with this. Yeah. And I go and I rely on what I used to be good at it and beat okay guys. But then in the end of it, I always get second because I don't do my homework. It's like, that's going to change.
Don't go the last mile.
Don't go the last mile. It's just whatever.
Yeah.
So I went home and I pulled up the national rankings and I was 54th in the nation. And I was like, okay. And then I pulled up each individual event and I found out where I was ranked in each event, and I would like put a line. And I was like, this week I will be to that level. And I just went on a burner. And I think in 8 or 9 weeks, I was second in the nation from 54th.
Jeez.
And then I won the first ever Amateur World Championships that summer as a upset against a Scottish guy, and one of the greatest to ever do it after that. And then I turned pro. But that was the stamp on it again of like, no, low effort is not acceptable. That is not a thing. And so that was what clicked me back into like, oh no, like you're meant to go out and kick ass. That's what this is. Don't wash away 2005, 2006. That was hard. You got through it. You didn't die that day. Now it's time to thrive again. And so I was a pro Scottish Highland Games athlete for a few years. So
that had to have been an absolute trip.
That was wild. That was way more fun than track and field.
Yeah, I'll bet.
It was awesome. You wear a kilt.
The guys are probably jabbing each other constantly.
And you're drinking beer in the middle of the day. Like old ladies are like bringing you shots. It was wild. So it was like this human performance world. It was like none of the sterility of the USA track and field. It was like, hey man, we all realize this is somewhat absurd. We're throwing trees. We're throwing trees. But what I also, when I went pro, like you were making money. So like I was making between $500 and $2,000 a weekend cash.
Oh my gosh.
And so I'm like, whoa, hold on. We figured out the cheat code to life. I was like, I'm doing the thing I love to do because I loved throwing and competing. And then my goal was, I said, I will consider this a success if I can make enough money every year to pay for my deer leases, buy a scope and a rifle and all the ammo and arrows that I need. If I could pay for all my hunting off of my thing that I love doing, I was like, I had the world by the ass.
Yeah, that's the cheat code.
That's the cheat code. I was like, the two things I want to do, one pays for the other, I'm set. You know, and then I ended up getting hurt and then came back to the realization, I've chased all my dreams. And then I'm 33 years old or whatever at the time. I'm not married, no kids. And I'm like, Bert, you run a pretty self-centered life. Like you ran after all these dreams, you did all this stuff. Cool, great on you.
Now what?
Now what? What's the real challenge? Like when I leave this world, are they gonna go, I went back to caring so much about how far I can make an implement go. I'm like, I'm right back to that. My PR means everything. I'm like, screw that, I screwed it up again. I was excited about the process and then it became the product. Because I almost killed myself because I ended up tearing up my ankle, getting a deep vein thrombosis and almost clocked out. But I remember I was at the Hammer World Championships and my leg was blown up. And I remember I didn't care because I was like, I could win this. And it was just like, hold on, where am I at? Where's my mind right now? And I was like, I'm not making mature decisions. I've allowed this to cloud me once again. And so I walked away from it.
Wow.
And it was like, okay, I'm going to put effort into my business that it will be sustainable, that will not only help me, but it'll help the people that come after me, it'll help my employees, it'll help the industry. I'm going to be more serious about, my relationships and finding a good wife and doing all the things that I said I was going to do, because when I was 10 years old, I wanted to have little kids. Now I'm 33 years old and I don't even have prospects.
Yeah.
It's like, hold on, you're like, I'm gonna wake up and the race is gonna be more over than I choose it to be. And so that was kind of like the end of my sports career.
Wow. So let's talk about Sorinex real quick. So your dad started it, and you've continued it. What is it, for those that don't know? Because, you know, I see this stuff and I hear about it, but there's a lot of people that have not fully understand what you guys do.
Sure. That's probably, especially in the outdoor world. Why does that guy keep showing up?
The guy with the beard. Who's that guy with the beard?
No, he's a tree throwing guy. It's weird. I don't know. No, so my dad started Sorinex 1980, so 44 years ago now, in our carport. And so we build strength equipment. So it's racks, benches, you know, to paint it with a broad stroke. It's that, but we specialize in like high-end human performance. High-end meaning athletes, I say it this way, for those who can afford anything but to lose. So if it's the people that are going after winning Super Bowls or Olympics or elite military organizations that are keeping the world free, and so those are generally our customer base, and we work really, really hard to build custom solutions and like cutting edge, innovative solutions to do that. And I can say that we have changed the face of the industry in the last 10 to 15 years. And so like, and I don't say that from an elite standpoint or whatever, it's just, we've been very blessed that we've been able to do it. And so, you know, that's what I do day in, day out. And we design and build and make sure that the people who want to perform at the highest level, it would be the equivalent of, you know, if you wanted to shoot the farthest and the most accurate and whatever, it's like, I'm not going to name any names of brands or whatever, but it's like,
I'm going to build it.
Yeah. And so like we're going to go after that and try to do that. So that's what we do.
So you guys have, because I've seen, you know, college weight rooms, athletic weight rooms that are Sorinex, to name like the Ducks is one of them, right?
Yeah, Oregon Ducks. I mean, we're installing University of Nebraska's football right now.
That's
like
awesome.
It's going in as we speak, and we're building Indiana's football stuff right now. That's in the queue. LA Rams are being built right now, and so you got Tom Brady.
Is it weight machines and everything, or is it just?
We do flooring. We do the rubber floor. We do the racks, the dumbbells, the kettlebells, medicine balls, like anything that comes from that high-end human performance, all the way to like sometimes like the UFC and the performance institutes. It might even be down to supplying them with the diagnostic tools that, you know, see horsepower, like all that kind of back to the Rocky IV stuff. Right?
Yeah.
So it's very, very interesting to me. It would be the equivalent of someone who's in the hunting industry trying to build the best rifles in the world. It goes hand in hand. It's what I'm interested in, and if you're passionate about something, you'll generally flip over all the rocks to run the experiment and figure it out.
And you also do stuff for like home gyms too, right?
We do, yeah. And so that's the thing. A lot of people feel like, oh, you guys only do big stuff. Like, partially, it's a nicer, higher end product. So those are the people who are like, again, can't afford to lose, like University of Georgia or Alabama or whoever it is. Like they're going to get the best because they got to win, right? But we do a lot of stuff for home gyms, and we've done, like I said, Tom Brady's, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Rogan, Cameron Haynes, John Dudley, Jocko Willink, like, and all those people, they bought it. Like, and that, so it's, you know, that type of person might have the means, but there's thousands of dudes you've never heard of that got really cool Sorinex gyms in their house. And we put just as much effort into that. Like, you know, people say, like, who's your favorite customers? Like, whoever I'm sitting across the table from.
Yeah. Like,
I'm trying to win for them. Like, I feel like we're a part of their solutions team. Like, I want to build them the best possible freaking weight room that I want them to get to the other end of it and go, holy cow, I didn't realize it was that good.
Right.
And that's the goal, right? That's what we go after. And most of the time we hit that. And some of it has budget restraints and things like that. But, you know, it'd be like a hunting guide, you know. If a good one, he wants his hunter to kill.
Yeah, he wants success.
He wants success, and I have success when my client has success, when they get bigger, stronger, win games, go to bowl games, get PRs. Like that's That's my favorite part of watching the bowls. I just like seeing how many of our customers are in the different games, and and when they talk about them on TV, they're like, man, they're a big, strong, physical team. There's a little percentage of that I could go, oh, cool.
That's me.
We help that. That's cool. Like, yeah.
That's way cool. So, what's next?
What's next?
Yeah.
So,
what's the dream or the next 2 years? What do you see Bert doing?
so I'm super pumped about Sorin X Outdoors coming online, and that's kind of it's kind of been a weird one because it's like the two things I'm passionate about, and I'm just kind of trying to figure out like how do we, in real terms, with something that's actually valuable to both communities. Because you could do a bunch of weird stuff that doesn't make a difference, but it's like, okay, what are we really good at, and what does this group of people need? Because it's like, I look at my phone, like I have you, and like all these, like some of the best hunters and outdoorsmen on the planet, and then I have some of the best strength coaches and athletes on the planet. It's like these two groups should have opportunities to show value to one another. So Sorin X Outdoors, that's how that was designed, and then it was just more of an exploratory, like, what can we do to add value? And we're not going to put something onto the market until we legitimately feel like we could add value. But we have a new thing that we're going to launch here at Winter Strong, and so it's basically, I'll tell you a little bit about it. It's called the Outfitter Rack, and so it's, if you took like the Venn diagram of people who work out or want to work out, not gym bros, not guys that like trying to make the Olympics, but guys that need some good, solid, American-made, high-end gear, and then you took a Venn diagram of people are the outdoors, hunting, fishing, camping, overlanding, whatever it is. And then the last little piece of gear guys, because a lot of us are gear guys. Some of us are some minimalists, but I'm a gear guy. That trips my trigger. So I tried to create a product that was like, what would I want, and so basically it's a system it's a hybrid system of a gym mixed with, think of like a John Wick room, like a commando. So you could store all of your gear, and it has like a proprietary whole system on there. So you have all these accessories that you could hold: guns, bows, quivers, packs, and you could basically build out your gear locker. Think of like a Navy SEAL with his gear locker. So it's a gear locker that also has the ability to be used as your strength and conditioning training. So it's the ultimate prep space. So it's prepping your tangible gear, but it's also the application of you are making yourself stronger, more capable. And so it's kind of for those people that kind of want the best of both worlds, but maybe don't have all the space to have, a whole area of the Connex and all this other stuff. So it's like, okay, what can the average person afford to put it in their home that's be high-end stuff that they could infinitely customize it. Everyone can put their own fingerprint on it. So like we're going to be launching that soon. That's really cool. A really exciting piece, because I'll be honest, like I kind of have that at my house now. In between sets of squats, I like shooting my bow. I like mounting scopes. I like packing up for elk hunts. Like I have a table that's right beside and I'm going back and forth, and I'm having something on a bipod, and I gotta rest for 90 seconds anyway. Might as well do what I want to be doing. And so I'm packing out for a Missouri bow hunt. And
it's probably motivating too, having all that stuff sitting there as you're staring it in the face.
Because you want to mess with all your stuff. Yeah. You want to get it dialed in. You want to have, and then you're like, man, I really, you see, I bought this bow. I better be doing the work that allows me to run that thing. And like, well, okay, I could do the work, but if I can't get up that hill after that bowl today, so I need to hit another set of squats. Yeah. All right, while I'm waiting on that, I'm gonna do a set of pull-ups. And so to me, it's like this big like tornado of capability, but also kind of like keeping yourself pumped up about like, let's go get it. Let's run the experiment, right? Yeah.
So, that's cool.
Yeah. So we got to get one out to you guys.
Yeah, we do. We need one for the office. That'd be awesome. It'd be really cool.
Hang all kinds of cool stuff on it. Train, have a gym there for your peeps.
Yep.
So yeah,
that would be cool. So I know we've got a thing with Yeti and Montana Knife tonight that we got to go to. So I'm not going to take all of your time, but I do want to ask you the 3 questions.
Yes, sir.
So the first one is, why does Bert hunt?
I hunt because it's in me. I don't know if that was put by God. I don't know if that was put there as a kid. I don't know if it's a hereditary or environment thing. Like it consumes who I am. I'm never happier than when I'm a pair of boots, a weapon in my hand, a morning that I'm walking out into by myself and I don't have to be anywhere. It's absolutely vital to who I am as a person. And even my wife has said it. When we got married, she's not a hunter. She respects and appreciates hunting, but that's not her thing. But people are like, I can't believe you let Bert hunt so much. She goes, listen, there's no way that God didn't put that in him because it's in there so deep. And she goes, and if God put it in him, who am I to ever disagree with that? Yeah. She's like, it's in his DNA. And we see it in my youngest son, and she laughs. She's like, oh, it's in Kodiak. That's who he is. I'm like, so it's interesting to realize, I think at some point, it's just who you are. It's how you're geared, and I am. And I just feel super fortunate that I have the capacity to like chase that. Because I can't imagine if I was stuck in a cage somewhere, and a cage, it means a city.
Yeah, concrete jungle.
Yeah, I can't imagine it. I've been, you go to Vegas and it's like so anxious. And I remember leaving Vegas the first time, and the only pleasure I had while I was in a taxi, I never forget it. And I looked in the back window, and I see the mountains in the background, and the sun coming over the mountains. I was like, that was the only dopamine hit I got in Vegas. It was like, oh, there is a nature around here.
Yeah.
Okay, then I could deal a little bit, but I'm still getting the hell out of here.
Yeah. That's cool. The deep one is, what are you going to be thinking about on your deathbed? God willing, you have a deathbed.
I'll have to. I've thought about this often, actually. I think a lot about. Someone told me one time. They said, think about. It's kind of like programming. Think about the end of your life, like the body of work you've created, because that's really what it boils down to. That's your body of work. That's what you've left this world with. What do you want that story to be? What do you want that body of work to be? And you can't write it on your deathbed. Like, you always have to be writing. Every action you make is writing that. And I thought about it. I was like, gosh, there's a part of me that would want the world to be sad I was gone. I heard Bert Kreischer say that the other day. He's like, he started crying, talking about it. He's like, when I die, he goes, I want people to go, you know what? It'd be a lot cooler if Bert was here right now. And I'm like, yes. I texted him like, yes, that's it. I want people to go, gosh, it would be much better if that guy was still here right now. But the second part of it is I want that to clear pretty fast because I don't want people to be sad. I want people to go, man, that guy left this place better than he found it. And that was cool. Really wish he was here, but man, glad we knew that cat, And I guess possible, and then to quote, Laura Zara?
Oh, yeah.
So Laura. And she told me one thing, and it still chokes me up talking about it. And she told me after she almost got eaten by a grizzly bear one time, as naturally, she said, if I die tomorrow, I'm okay with it because I've lived the way I wanted to live. But if I live to 150 years old, it won't be long enough. And I was like...
That's a really good way to put that.
I was like, you nailed it. You nailed it. I wouldn't say afraid to die, but I'm not done.
Yeah.
I'm not done. I want to die a young man a long time from now. And so, like, in my deathbed, I will just want to know that I do a good job. Am I a person in good standing with my family, with the world? And if that is a question or a fear, I try to reverse engineer that and make sure that won't be a question when that's there. And I just want to make sure that, hey, everyone knows I love them. But again, I get to do that now. If I question that, that means I did it wrong. And so I just want to make sure that I check all those boxes and do a really good job at being someone that's blessed with this life as long as I can.
I have a feeling we almost already talked about this, but I'm going to ask it again.
We almost
if you have the
already
opportunity
talked
to
about
TED
this,
Talk,
but I'm going to ask you, if you had the opportunity to do a TED Talk, what would you talk about?
Oh, man. Gosh.
Oh man, it's so much.
This is, oh man, it's so much. It's so much. I mean,
Someone really interesting.
I don't know if I want to do one thing. I
That's
just
fair.
want to talk to
That's
someone
100%
really
fair.
Talk to someone really
I would want to talk to someone really, really interesting and ask a lot of questions.
how to ask questions. And
That would be my TED
how
Talk.
to learn and feel.
How to ask questions.
how to ask questions, and then how to learn and feel from other people's life. You remember like in the Highlander where he kept chopping everyone's heads off, and then he just kept getting stronger because he would absorb their power?
That kind of thing.
Not necessarily that violent.
But that kind of thing.
But yeah, you want to be with people and know that like your energy and your power is powering them up and making their life better. So there's that energy exchange. And when you walk away from it, you're like I will walking away from this conversation. I'm better from this. Hopefully some of my energy went into you and you're better from this. And then both of us go, wow, our lives are now some percentage better than they were an hour and a half ago. And if that happened, then I think we both did a great job. And that would be what I would talk about.
And that's what this is about, is these guys, this audience gets to get that energy from you and walk away from it with some tidbits on, the big buck theory and how to reverse engineer their life so that their deathbed is where they want it to be. So that is awesome.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for the time.
Man, thank you for just all you and your family have done. I mean, I look back and go, part of the stuff we've talked about is because things you and your family inadvertently did for an only child kid in South Carolina that at one point never thought he would see Alaska, never thought he would see, the Tetons, never, a little Irma, South Carolina kid. Yeah. But all those publications and the writings like built a fire inside that it was one day I was like, okay, I will go get to do those things. And then you always being so gracious. I mean, like you guys are a big deal. Like in the first time I met you at Glenn's place, you were just super nice and listen and ask great questions. And like in my opinion, that's a blessing to everyone around you in your business. So like these people get to enjoy your body of work and your family's body of work. And that can't be taken too lightly. So I appreciate you.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I've been blessed with, I'm standing on shoulders that were much broader than mine. So
right?
I'm just trying not to die.
Don't die today.
Don't die today. Well, appreciate it, Bert. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
I really
take care.
appreciate it. Yes, sir.